I was gonna say, what are you doing flying an economy?
Michael Jackson's son, Prince's story is a pretty difficult one. Back in 1997, Michael was the biggest star on the planet, and he had just become a father for the first time. And Prince was instantly famous. And we're talking mega famous. He was pretty much a celebrity before he could even walk or talk. But this hasn't exactly been easy on him. And you guys will never believe how much he struggled. I'm pretty sure the whole world knew that this kid was going to have an extremely difficult life, even before factoring in all of his dad's drama. I mean, we know now that any child born to a famous parent will spend the rest of their lives being compared to them. When your dad is hailed as the greatest entertainer the world has ever known, well, you're kind of doomed to be disappointing to a lot of people if you can't be that, right? There was just no way that Prince or any of Michael's kids could ever live up to the impossible standard that Michael set in his performance. But all of that is not even the most tragic part of what Prince's life would become. Actually, all of it can really be traced back to his childhood, and his childhood was pretty insane. It was always going to be so different from anybody else's. He was raised on the Neverland Ranch, spending basically every day in what his dad considered the happiest place on earth. But here's what's truly crazy. He had no idea of what was going on outside those walls. All he knew was fun. Basically, he was living in a bubble where he never had to know about how the whole world was talking about him and questioning everything about his identity, or how the media were investigating and spreading all these rumors about his biological links to Michael. Because here's a really tragic thing that he had to deal with as a child. Most of the newspaper coverage about Prince was all about how he could not possibly be Michael's real son. People kept saying that he was some kind of donor baby, which meant that he wasn't a true Jackson child. The whole thing was so weird, obsessive, and creepy. And given that he was literally under 10 years old at that point, it would have devastated him if he had to see that every day. It was like he had just been born, and now he was just another object to be looked at like his dad. But Michael did everything that he could to protect Prince and his siblings, Paris and Bigi, from the prying eyes of the outside world and the media. I honestly can't imagine how weird and difficult that must have been, to be a child and not be able to have ordinary friends, to spend your whole life on one ranch sheltered from the world. It seemed kind of inevitable that Prince and his siblings were going to end up as sheltered, socially awkward kids, not unlike their dad actually. But they would never have to worry about that because their whole world was about to come crashing down. In 2009, when Prince was just 12, Michael suddenly passed away from an accidental medical mishap. Suddenly, the only real friend these kids had ever had outside of their own siblings was ripped away from them, which just makes it all so much worse. These kids really were not equipped or prepared to handle the outside world. That was something Michael always handled because he was the only one who understood it. Now they were left completely alone to fend for themselves. Although they did have their grandmother, Catherine, who took legal guardianship and worked to raise the children, which may actually have been healthier for them than simply growing up in a closed bubble from the rest of the world. But it meant that they couldn't be hidden from the attention anymore. And because Prince was the oldest, the world was obsessed with scrutinizing basically every choice he made. Newspapers would analyze the bone structure of his face as he got older, trying to compare them to Michael's just to prove that he was not Michael's biological son. It's hard to imagine how overwhelming it must have been to be grieving your father while also being attacked for basically existing. Everything that Prince did was compared to his dad, as if he was supposed to somehow continue or live up to the legacy that Michael left behind, which is insane. Michael was one of a kind. It's already crazy to put that pressure on someone else, but to do it to a child is truly unfair, especially since Prince obviously didn't want to do what his dad did. Not least because it seemed to these kids that their dad was being harassed endlessly by people who never knew him. It's not exactly the kind of life you'd willingly choose to go into unless you had to. Let's not forget that Michael himself was kind of pushed into it. So instead, Prince decided that he was going to make his own path from his dad's legacy, which I have to admire. I mean, he really did bypass the whole Nepo baby conversation when he decided to go and study business administration. And on top of that, he did something else that proved to be a life-defining moment. He co-founded the charity Heal Los Angeles while in college, which ended up helping provide meals to those in need during the COVID-19 pandemic. But here's the really tragic thing about all of this. Prince has done so many incredible things in his life. He went and got himself a business administration degree. He co-founded a charity that turned out to be extremely important during the pandemic. But every single time that he did these things and tried to branch out on his own path, the world would just bring him right back. Right back to his father and his legacy. It's the same story we hear over and over from children of famous people. Honestly, I think Prince is an example of someone who has truly worked to define himself as someone other than Michael's son. I mean, what else could he have done? At some point, Prince started to realize that he could never really escape his father's shadow, so he embraced it. He and his siblings were brought closer together after Michael's passing, and their few public appearances show how strong that bond has become. On the 15th anniversary of his dad's passing, Prince posted a heartfelt tribute on his social media accounts, writing, "Miss you, Pops, and the world felt better with you in it." Now he's always working on projects that honor and celebrate his father. Musicals, movies, you name it. It seems like Prince has actually come to accept the fact that he'll never be able to truly get out of that shadow. And I don't know how I would really feel about that. But it seems like he's truly happy for the first time in a long time. And I really hope that he and his siblings can stay that way. But what do you guys think? Do you think it's tragic that Prince will forever be known simply as Michael's son? Or do you think he hasn't done enough to define himself otherwise? Maybe his involvement in all of Michael's things will just keep him trapped in that role. I personally feel for the guy. His whole life has been lived under the biggest microscope the world has ever seen. He's had to cope with hearing people talk about him, his siblings, and his father like they're animals. He's tried to carve his own path, but he just keeps getting treated as Michael's son first and foremost. I can't imagine how frustrating that kind of life must be. But maybe someday he'll be able to break out of it and be viewed as his own person. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below.